Hello and welcome to a brand new series of Webinar Wednesdays. I'm Kat, the Marketing Manager here at Virtue. I appreciate you can usually see me, but this week, for technical reasons, I'm hidden behind the camera because this is our first live and in-person webinar, which is quite exciting for me. For those of you who haven't caught an episode of Webinar Wednesdays before, it's a Virtue Technology series that's filled with taking topical information from the education IT sector and sharing it with you. We do this through informal discussions and via a series of presenters. Having said that, this week is a little bit different because Virtue is 15 years old this year. So we're actually restarting Webinar Wednesdays for the new academic term by getting our MD and CEO together for a little bit more of a general chat about Virtue, how we've seen the education sector change over those 15 years and how our business has adapted to support those changes. But what hasn't changed for this week is that you're more than welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar, although we will probably wait until the end for the Q&A section, but pop them in the chat box. I've also got a few pre-event questions that have been submitted via customers, and you can do that for any of our Webinar Wednesdays using the email address marketing@virtuetechnologies.co.uk, and you're always welcome to submit questions in advance this way and after the fact if you need a little bit more time to think about your questions. So on that note, I'm excited to introduce the two gentlemen who are sat opposite me, who've been very patient this entire time. So we've got Simon Steele and Phil Lawson, our MD and CEO respectively. I'm just going to jump straight in.
Hi everyone, afternoon.
So why did you start Virtue Technologies?
Gosh, that's that one. There's a bit of a story behind it, so I should probably tell a story. So the history is myself and Simon worked together for 5 years prior to starting Virtue. I suppose I always had it in my back of my mind. I always wanted to do something on my own. I always kind of thought I could, I'd like the idea of it, but I did 5 years kind of learning my trade as such. Me and Simon worked together for 4.5 of that, and then Simon went elsewhere for 6 months. So I decided, when I wanted to start a business, and as everybody who's dealt with me over 15 years, whilst I do have a decent technical overview understanding, I certainly am not capable of fixing anything or installing anything or putting anything in. So when you start a business, whilst I could sell it and I had the bones of running a business, I definitely needed somebody who knew what they were doing. So I had a look around, everybody I knew, couldn't find anybody. And then eventually I thought about Simon. And I spent the next kind of like 3 months asking Simon to be my business partner, which he turned me down 3 times, I think. Like, I was getting pretty desperate at this point. So I really did persuade him, and eventually he said yes, because I think he was sick of me pestering him, basically. So, and then we set up Virtue, I think 2006. Is that right? I'm getting that right, aren't I? Yeah, 15 years.
January.
Yeah, my maths is all right. Yeah. And I guess like anybody who sets up a business, you think you can do it better than anybody else that's in the market. You see an opportunity. You think you've learned enough, and you have learned lots, but you haven't learned everything. That's certainly something we'll talk about as we go through. But we built a team quite quickly. We had existing industry expertise and industry knowledge. We knew lots of people in the education sector. That's the 5 years we'd spent dealing with the customer base. So we took on a couple of staff quite quickly, and I'm really sort of proud to say that the two that came straight away are still here. So Chris Abrams, as many of you will know, worked with me and Simon previously. He joined us, and Gail, who's again been with us it still is now, and we'll talk about Gail's role a little bit later. And then that was kind of the first year, and at the end of the first year, Lee Burnett came in, which I know a lot of you, Lee's still here and a very well-known face of Virtue. So it's great, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we go through, but it's great to have the first 3 names on the payroll are still the first 3 names on the payroll. So it's great. And I think we, on top of that is we set it up, and we had a lot of what we do at Virtue, me and Simon have done naturally in terms of the way we go about things. I was looking actually at our kind of first orders, as you do sometimes, as to the first orders and the first customers. And I would say probably 80% of the customers that we had in the first 20 customers 15 years ago are still customers today, which is pretty incredible for a business. And actually, there's probably the 20% that aren't, 10% of them don't exist anymore. So we've not, for various reasons. So that's kind of the story of how we started it. And it's it was a really, really great first year, to be honest.
And Simon, I'm going to ask you a question too, because this is about our values and ethos, and being the marketing manager, you and I talk about this quite a lot. So
yeah,
what is the Virtue difference?
Oh, don't ask me that. Yeah, I think, well, if I roll that back a little bit, I think we've always had a focus on people. Me and Phil are both naturally people focused. It sounds a bit cheesy. We care about people and what they're doing. We want to support them, and that transcends employees and customers. And I think that's the same today, and it's obviously evolved a lot. And I'll talk about the changes in a bit. But yeah, I think that initial part of our ethos and values are largely based on our own individual personalities, which, although we are quite different in that area, we're very similar. We do share a lot of same views and values around that stuff. And it's simple stuff, being open with people, being focused on helping people. Whether you're an employee or a customer, it's the same. Whether that's developing an employee to get the skills they want to get, or delivering an outcome for a customer, I think it's the same kind of focus. And I think at the core of everything, it's always doing what we say we're going to do. If you can keep to that over a period of time, you generate trust. And again, whether that's your employees or your customers, and going back to what Phil said, first 3 people on the payroll are still here, and a large percentage of our customers are still here. So I think that kind of is a good example that we've done that, delivered our word against that. And I think another, looking back and moving on through that 15 years, I think the key to everything is people, and bringing in the right people. And as we get bigger, we would always prioritise the right personality over skill set. Somebody who can work with other people, is focused on the outcome, doing the right thing, helping each other, that they would always get the edge in an interview process over someone who can probably come in and make radical change, but do that in themselves and not necessarily take everyone with them. So I think people have been at the centre of our organisation since we started, and if anything, we have more focus on that now than we ever have. And then bringing us up to current date on that stuff. With Gail, who Phil mentioned before, that's been with us since the beginning, is her role's transcending into a head of people role. So we're at that point where we're dedicating a full-time role for someone to really focus on embedding these ethos and values, and that's how seriously we take it. Really, as we scale, we feel that's what we need to keep that consistency around that stuff. That's kind of how it works.
Good. And so I was next going to ask how it's evolved, but I suppose Simon's partially answered that question, Phil. So I guess the real question is, how has it evolved in your opinion over these?
So it's evolved a lot for me. My personal role has gone kind of through stages of kind of knowing absolutely everything about everything, which I did for a long time. To kind of then having a very good overview of everything, and then now I'm probably at a stage where I have a great view of the big picture, which is actually really, really important. So my personal kind of journey within Virtue is a reflection of Virtue, and so when you get to the scale that we're at now, you've absolutely got to have your eyes on the big picture, and that's, if I look back to some of the, when I was involved in everything, and I knew every customer individually, and I dealt with them weekly, that's great, but you miss the big picture and you don't see the big things very well. So now that I'm a little bit more removed, and I do still see plenty of customers, and I do still speak to a lot of staff members all the time, but I'm much more kind of on the periphery of of kind of things, and I look at the big decisions and I make the strategic kind of thing, and that because I'm on that one step out, I can now sort of see things a little bit differently. So a lot of my day now has gone from dealing with day-to-day customer quotes, solutions, problems, whatever that might be, to kind of I'll sit down with Simon and I'll talk about kind of how our approach to the way we're going to look at the people that Simon talked about, the solutions that we're going to put together, and how we might put that to the market, and how does it fit the budgets that are around, and does it fit the kind of the policies that are coming out, and then ultimately the needs of our customers. And I'll sit down with lots of other people, Bill McNair, and talk about kind of the helping and how we work with his team and develop his team. And I'm still very much on the finance side. So my role is very much about overseeing, advising, consulting in lots of ways, rather than actually doing much. So it sounds like I've got a great easy life, doesn't it? But I think that's a reflection of how the company's scaled. One of the big challenges you've got as you kind of evolve and get bigger ultimately, we're now it's a big company now as opposed to kind of 5 or 6 people that it was originally, is you've got to stay efficient. I know myself and Simon were talking the other day that we haven't really put the price of our services up in about 10 years, and ultimately to allow that to happen, we have to stay really efficient. So it's about staying switched on to unnecessary costs, unnecessary admin, bureaucracy, that sort of stuff, which can always creep into any organisation as it gets bigger. So that's kind of that's been one of the things that I look at, and I'm looking at how do we stay lean, how do we stay efficient, how do we progress and be better, but without costing, because there's a lot of financial pressure on the customer base we work with. There has been a lot over the period, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on as well. So it's great that we've been able to do that, and ultimately that's because the business has developed, and my role's developed, and Simon's role's developed. Simon's evolved from kind of leading the technical side of the business to leading the whole business day to day, which has been a big change, and probably one for the better, to be honest, if that's most people.
And I'm kind of going to go in with a question that we've talked a lot about virtue so far. So I kind of want to understand how we've adapted our business to the changes in the education sector during that time period.
I'll probably carry on from my last question, really. I mean, basically what we've seen over the last 15 years is it's very tied to politics and governments and their individual policies, the way our business model fits, because we are ultimately dealing with a public sector organisation in its many guises of education. We go back to the late 2000s, it was very much local authority controlled. It was very big, very cumbersome, very bureaucratic, if I'm honest. They weren't interested in dealing with a young, small company that focused on outcomes. It was very much, about compliance and risk management, and everything took months and months, and we just didn't fit. So we had to kind of pick off the scraps in lots of ways at that time, and there was plenty of scraps as such, not, but the really big contracts were going, to very big companies, and that's suited us. We built a business and we built relationships. Then we had a massive program called Building Skills to the Future, which was kind of huge money, new buildings, fully managed service, and it was horrible, if I'm honest, as a concept. And we're still paying the price as a country for it now. It took staff from jobs where they had autonomy. You look at the IT teams in schools, it took their autonomy away from them. They were paid into big support organisations. They lost their development, and it was quite sort of, it's horrible to watch, actually, the personal side of it in that period, where you had really, really good IT teams that we worked in partnership with and had done for years, sort of pulled apart and split up, and there was such a personal side of it, and it ultimately was very, very poor value for the skills. But that was, in that period, it's quite a tough period for Virtue, because it got to the point where Building Skills to the Future contracts were going to 2 providers effectively in the end, because they were so big and it cost millions of pounds just to put a tender in, that we were kind of coming for our customers as such. But then there was a change of government, and then that got squashed straight away, and then the financial crisis happened, and then it was around the financial crisis, there was quite a good period for us as a business, actually, because there was a lot of investment into education post-financial crisis. And then the period of austerity came about 2 or 3 years after, and that was quite tough for a lot of schools. And again, you know, we saw a lot of redundancies and that type of thing, but we had to adapt, and it actually really suited us as a business. Because of that, I talked earlier about staying efficient, staying lean. That was really great for us, because we were going to these customers who had like huge budget cuts, and we were like, well, it suited our thinking, our mentality, and we were usually successful in that period, in a very challenging period. And then that kind of evolved into slightly better budgets, but still not great, but for our customers, and academisation, which was about localising control. So all them relationships that we built up over years were now at autonomy again. So we've gone this full circle from no autonomy back to, and that's great, because we're all about local relationships, doing a job, outcomes. Local relationships, because it's not just about some big fancy contract, it's about doing things and making it happen. And then that's evolved in the final stage we're in now of multi-academy trusts. You know, the growth of, so you know, you can see everything's in life's a cycle, and you can see what's happening now is trusts are getting bigger and scaling, and as a business we're in a position to scale with the multi-academy trusts, and we're seeing a huge amount of sort of traction with multi-academy trusts, and we've got some great relationships going on where we build a partnership. But we're anti the model that was done in Building Schools for the Future, which is that outsource shift, out thinking of your IT. Our model's all about partnership, and that always has been through all these different evolutions of doing business. It's always been about outcomes and partnerships. You know, you can't outsource thinking. It's one of the biggest things we'll always say from education, and that's what Building Schools of the Future was. It was like, you think about our IT, it doesn't work. So I think that's the evolution of how we've adapted, and we've pretty much grown every year within that period, but there's been periods of faster growth and steady growth. So yeah, it's been interesting, but yeah, I think it's a sign of getting old that you realise that everything just goes in cycles.
I think it is. Yeah.
And speaking of evolving and growing, Simon, our new regional office has just opened. So talk to me a little bit about what that means for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really easy, quick one. I mean, most people know I live south of Birmingham, and I've been trying to get a local office for 10 years, so somewhere to work outside my own house. No, I mean, it kind of goes back full circle to the beginning of what I was saying around people and focus and doing the right thing. We've got a number of customers in the Midlands area, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Worcestershire, Coventry. And we've always been about, like I say, doing the right thing, but doing it well. And we feel to service those customers, you know, account managers go and see them, get engineers on site promptly, being able to respond to things. You know, we need a presence in that area. So yeah, really exciting to open our first kind of satellite office down in that way, and we plan to do another one probably in the Yorkshire area for the same reasons. You know, we've got a good footprint to customers out that way. It's a little bit of a journey if we want to do things to a standard, and you know, we need to have that local presence, and it fits into that progression element. It's creating progression opportunities for people that are already here, and bringing in new people as well.
Well, that leads very nicely on to my final question, gentlemen, which is, what's next for Virtue?
I'll start on that. What's next for Virtue? Everybody asks me particularly all the time, what's your kind of exit strategy? What's your, you know, when are you going to sell it all? When are you going to do this? And then the reality is there is no exit strategy. There is no grand plan. You know, what our kind of ethos about what's next is, I personally, and Simon's very similar, and people we employ, you've got to be constantly challenging yourself, you know, bettering yourself, doing something that's taking you out of your comfort zone a little bit. And it's the same, you know, and that's why growth is important for a business. You know, extreme growth can be dangerous for business, but consistent growth is really important. It's like you wouldn't take yourself 5 levels out of your comfort zone because it's just too much, but you'll take yourself 1 level. And it's the same for what's next. We want to create opportunities. We want good people. We need to keep them. You know, everybody wants to progress. Everybody wants to move forward. So we're doing bigger contracts. We're doing bigger relationships. We're doing new services. We're doing a lot of strategy work. Will does a lot of work with around the strategy and working in partners. Very much about our partnership. So we're tied into this kind of, and it's all, we're always looking at services and you know, that we can offer and products that we can offer that add extra value. But it's continually taking yourself to that next level. There's no grand plan. There's no kind of like, you know,
Retiring at 50.
Retiring at 50, yeah. Now there's a 50 despite how we look.
No,
it's just been a tough life. But we just want to move everybody forward, and it's always about creating opportunity. We look at different regional offices. We want to our ideal scenario, and we talked a lot about this, the people that have been here, Gail, Chris, Lee, that have been Neil, even that have been here a really long time, and that's brilliant. We want everybody to have that opportunity, and for people to stay for a long time, you've got to keep them moving forward. You've got to give them lots of kind of things, and that, like I said, that's new customers. It's exciting projects to work on. It's challenges. It's difficult customers. You know, we have some customer situations that are really difficult, and people, you know, but we help customers to work through difficult situations, and that very much, you know, is a learning experience for everybody involved. So it's as simple as that, really, for me. It's continuing to grow, it's continuing to build partnerships, and it's giving opportunities for everybody within the business to stay with us ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to give you any juicy secret of what you're looking for. It's a bit of a rubbish webinar. I can't think of anything.
I mean, this was the easy bit because they were my questions and you'd seen those in advance. So now I'm going to run through some pre-event questions. I'm just going to let all of our audience know that while I'm doing that, you're more than welcome to add your own questions into the chat box, and I won't be vetting them. So I will ask them as seen to Phil and Simon, but I'll give you some time to write those in by asking the pre-event questions. So we've recently opened an office in the Midlands. Why is that? I think we've covered that, so we can job done. Well done, guys. From the website and on Twitter, we've seen that you've got a really high customer satisfaction score. Are you making them up?
It's a great one. Simon better answer that.
Oh, well, no, obviously. Again, I'm repeating myself, but if you've got the right people trying to do the right things, even if you get it wrong, people tend to appreciate that. And we do get it wrong occasionally, but we're always making decisions for the right reasons, trying to do the right things, you know, being personable. And I think, you know, if we're honest, if we look at all of those stats, we don't meet some of our SLAs around that, you know, support particularly. We have some internal SLAs that we give ourselves. And quite often we don't meet them, but still our satisfaction remains high, and that, you know, I think it's because we've got the right people and trying to do the right thing. And ultimately, there is ability sat behind that as well. It's not just about bringing in nice people.
It's about like I say, everything is about partnership. You know, it's just much easier to be in a partnership with everybody because you're all on the same page. And you know, if you're working through it, we have some pretty complex problems come in. You know, there's some really good IT teams that we work with that can fix a lot of, you know, a lot of problems. But so the ones that we tend to look at are pretty complex. So, you know, they can take a period of time to work on it. You know, we'll try multiple things and they're really satisfied because they've learned with us. And this is something we've also been massive on, actually, I've not talked about, is we have always, all our technical guys that go to site will always try their hardest to develop the teams that are on site. And I think that, you know, we want customers who are developing with us, growing with us. We want people who, it's not about, we'll come and do something, go away, don't tell you everything, so you'll have to pay us to come back. If you think long term, which is kind of what we're all about, you know, you do a good job, your customer develops, they come back to you anyway. And it's the same as when I talked about building skills to the future. People tied into a long-term contract they get out is horrible. Nobody wants to deal with people who are tied into a long-term contract. It's like being trapped. You know, you can't have a partnership if people can't get out of it. You know, and we have no long-term contracts, you know, and I think that's why we have to, deliver good service. We have to keep them stats where they are. They have to be that. I know they're high. They are high. They're like 97, 98, 99%.
They're not high enough.
But that's because, you know, we don't tie people into contracts. We don't.
It's a consistent experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, again, going back to the trust thing, you develop the trust that you're doing, you know, you are doing the right thing, you have the ability to do it, you're going to work with your customer over a period of time. You know, it highlights the trust and reliability, doesn't it? And I think that's why they remain high.
It is dead simple when you break it down. There's loads of rubbish gets spouted, and you see it all over social media now. Dead simple. You just say, if you say you're going to do something, do it. It's the simplest thing in the world. But if you do that, you know, if you say that you've got a problem, and I will try my best to fix this for you by the end of the day. And if you fix it by the end of the day, brilliant. If you haven't, ring the customer and say, look, I've done this, this, and this, and I've not managed to fix it, but you know, I'm going to work on it tonight, or I'm going to work on it. I'll be on it first thing. And you say, you know, it's that communication. You're saying what you're going to do. It's simple stuff. If you've got, you know, right back to the sales team. If you know somebody wants a price for a quote or a solution, you set a, you know, I'll get you that price by the end of the week, or I'll get you that price by the end of the hour. Whatever the expectation is, we do it. Dead simple. Like, life's like massively overcomplicated, isn't it? But it's dead simple. Just say what you're gonna. If you're gonna do something, you know, say you're gonna do it and do it.
There you go. And I can say, from a marketing perspective, I have seen the data. It is real. So this is a little bit trickier now. Somebody's been a bit mean to you guys. What mistakes have you made along the way?
Oh, well, I've not made any, so I'll have to.
I don't want the Simon made, actually.
Oh, here we go.
I think
We've all made mistakes.
there's loads of mistakes. I think one mistake, if you look at, we got drawn in, if I go back 10 years, probably, we got drawn into thin client world, technically, because it was actually, I talked about building skills to the future a lot. It was the hype around that. There was a load of marketing hype about it, the industry hype about it. And actually the hype was being driven by the ability to manage it, centralising it. So it tied into the model of building skills for the future. So thin client was driven, the hype was actually about ultimately profit for big business, not about the needs of education. But we got drawn into that, and we put it into 10 or 12 schools. And I think there's only one of them that's actually made it work. And it cost us a lot of money in time and effort, you know, reputational damage. It could have done, but I think, like, we're quite open, and we tried our best to work with people, and we didn't lose any of them customers, actually, you know, I can think of. But that was definitely a mistake, and you learn from that, though. You know, you learn that we got drawn into industry hype, and it was hype, and it was coming for the wrong reasons. So that was a mistake, definitely. Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that.
The other one I was thinking, probably this is one that Simon sort of identified, actually, but if we go back about 5 years, we all got a bit comfortable, and I think it was all just lovely and nice, and we were going through the motions, and we were doing an okay job for all our customers, and they were all relatively happy. But were we actually pushing things hard enough? We weren't, and Simon identified this, and we worked with some external help on this, actually, and kind of looked at the business a bit, you know, and things like this are an output of it. You know, it's a simple thing, but we didn't do anything like that. So we just sat and did a pretty good job technically, and waited for customers to come to us, and we didn't do enough talking about it. Everybody was comfortable. Yeah, and comfortable. Like I talked earlier about, everybody needs to be a little bit out of the comfort zone all the time. That's how you grow and develop as an individual and as a business. And we were all sat in our comfort zones, you know, telling each other how good we were, and it was great. And ultimately, you just stagnate a bit, and we did stagnate a bit, and you know, and that's something that Simon identified, and we actually worked a lot with quite an interesting partnership with Edge Hill, to look at the business and look at where we were going wrong. It was really interesting, some tough conversations about, you know, we didn't know all the answers, and everything wasn't perfect, and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah, it's good experience.
But yeah, that was probably about 5 years ago, and it's led to kind of a lot of the stuff we're doing now. So.
Well, I've not had any typed in questions, so I think that's it.
We're off the hook.
Guys. Yeah, you are. You've also not spoken for as long as I was warned you would. I was told, like, once you got on a webinar with an audience, that was going to be us for the day. So fair play.
False reputation.
Really range yourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, you've not asked enough questions about Simon as an individual. We can talk about himself all day.
Wow. And before it gets any harsher, I'm going to leave it there. So thank you both very, very much for your time. Thank you, everybody who is either watching live or watching on our YouTube catch up. We really appreciate you tuning in and catching up with Webinar Wednesdays. So I will be here next week for another Webinar Wednesday. Hope to see you guys all. And that's it from me. Thanks very much.
Thanks
everyone. Thanks, Jack.